And if anytime we do get any issues, I may lock the meeting and then just make sure you turn everything black, and then we'll resume once I get everything cleared up.
All righty.
It is 5:02.
All righty. Hey, everybody. So let's get this meeting started. We have public comment. It looks like we have quite a few visitors with us today. So Robert, do you have a sign-in sheet?
We asked that anybody that wanted to go ahead and speak, go to their chat box and then list their name, their address, and what issue they would like to speak about.
Okay.
And then I will go ahead and start the timer once they begin to speak. So at this time, if you do wish to make any public comment, go ahead and type into the chat box. And the first person we have is Emily Park, parking for beach.
Supposed to put you up.
What?
Supposed to put you up.
Or Emily. Go ahead, Emily.
Hi there. I was wondering if we could make the parking that's along the parks, the playground parks, private for town residents, maybe do like a parking pass or something. That way it would cut down out-of-towners being able to come park for free and walk down to the beach area, and maybe control a little bit more the amount of visitors at a time.
Are you talking about the parking at Central Park for the Lake Down parks?
I'm sorry, I am a new resident, so I don't know the names specifically, but I mean where on Oakdale, where the church is and the playground.
Central Park.
That's Central Park.
And then down by Second, the other park. There's also like another parking down there.
Palmer Park?
Maybe. The playground.
You know, especially with Central Park, we've used FERDAP funds for that park, so it is open to the public, the general public. So creating just resident-only parking is very difficult and difficult to enforce. So I don't think we're going to be able to entertain that at this time. And plus, again, with the FERDAP funds used for Central Park, again, it has to be open to the public. It is a public park. Palmer Park, we haven't used FERDAP funds for that, but it is a public park. You know, public parks, you know, they have their benefits living next to them, and they also have their downturns of living next to them. But they're open to the public, general public, and people can access them at any time. The only thing that is private is the tennis courts and the boat ramp.
Okay. That was all.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the next one I have is, sorry if I butchered this, Tanya Roskaft.
That was perfect.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I know that it's on the agenda to be discussed. I see it slightly a little bit further down. I don't see what all is being discussed. So I don't know if you'd like for me to wait until that time or just discuss the issue that's been going on.
It's your call. You can wait until we get to the agenda item, or you can speak about it now.
Okay, then I'll wait until you get there.
What is the issue, just so I know?
So the issue overall is we live in the Manors, and we use both courts in Windermere. And recently we have left Lake Cane for our child in the tennis academy that was there, and found another provider that can coach. And he has taken 5 Lake Cane tennis players from them and is working with my child at the courts.
Yeah. I got your email.
Oh, that was actually my husband. I didn't send an email.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But there are members. It's not just my child that lives in Windermere. There are the Parkers, Reagan and Reese Parker. Anyway, there's several of his people that are in that group that live in Windermere, and I want him to be able to continue to coach my child while I'm at work on the courts since I'm a resident.
This is Brandon we're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay.
And there are several people using the courts that are not Windermere residents, and they are not coaching Windermere residents. So instead of targeting them, they're targeting, honestly, people that took business away. So my grievance is I would like for him to be able to continue coaching my child.
Okay.
All right.
No, I think that there are people on the line that may be interested in the subject matter. So if we can bump that up the agenda and go ahead and take care of that.
Okay.
Because I know some may have comments relative to Fernwood. The issue that we're having is, you know, there's two sides to every story. If you are a resident of the town of Windermere and have a tennis pass or tennis key, you are allowed to hire a tennis coach to train with on the courts. And that coach is allowed to be on that court with you and other residents to train or to teach. This understanding of the rules and regulations of the, when you fill out the tennis pass and so on and so forth, and that's always been understood. So we had an instance yesterday where I received a text message that there was people coaching on the tennis courts, you know, and they were not coaching Windermere residents. So we sent over Mark DiStefano who's a police officer, over to the tennis courts. I'm working Monday, Wednesday, and Friday this week because we're doing staggered shifts, or else I would have gone myself. But the person that they spoke to was Brandon, who I guess teaches for First Academy. So I did reach out to Brandon, and I'm trying to get everything in writing at this point because Brandon's not the only one that has had issues over at the Windermere Recreation Center. Yeah.
I was actually there yesterday when this incident occurred and when the police officer came up. But it seems like he is the only one that's having an issue with it when he is actually coaching people from the town of Windermere. And
he's not. I can say that right now. I have another coach who I had to speak with, not associated with Brandon, that was having an issue as well. And what it seems to be is that, again, when I talk to Brandon, I want to get the names of the residents and get their side of the story and Brandon's side of the story. And I think Doug is familiar with what's going on, but it seems like Marcelo has a clinic and he's allowed to use the courts for teaching both residents and non-residents. But the other coaches that are now teaching some of his previous students, you have a person by the name of Damon who is constantly contacting not only Parks and Recreation Committee members, but also the police department, and calling the cops, stating that there are coaches out there that are teaching non-residents, and that's not the case. Brandon, when I spoke with him, he said he would give me a list of names of the people that are out there. As you can see, some of his clients are here, and they're willing to go ahead and give their addresses and their testimony that this is not the case, that they are residents, they do have keys. We have confirmed that they have keys, and they're allowed to teach their kids on those courts. And that's my understanding of the rules and regulations. Now, if Marcelo or Damon have an issue with this, you know, I'm going to speak with them individually next week and let them know that unless you can identify specifically that they are teaching non-residents, you know, we're no longer going to be sending the police officers out there. It just escalates the issue and exposes my officers. So it's not fair to the people that are coaching. It's not fair to the residents that are out there, in my opinion, to have this back and forth between, you know, various tennis pros.
I really appreciate that because it's really become a nuisance. The Damon person has called and has been up there and honestly harassing the fact that we are out there, and it doesn't need to happen.
We've had even Lillian and Diane have had to field numerous calls from Damon. And then once, we get several phone calls again after when Damon either interrupts or accuses other tennis pros of not teaching Windermere residents, then we have those people call us and verify that they are Windermere residents and do have a key. So the issue, I believe, and this is just my opinion, is that you have a tennis pro that has lost business to somebody else and is trying to use the fact that they have been longtime providers of a service to the town of Windermere as either leverage or whatever it is to try to kick some of these guys out.
I completely agree.
And I'll open up to you, Nora and Doug, because I know that Doug is in charge of the tennis aspect, or Councilman McKinley, at least anybody else. But, in the grand scheme of things, this is not an issue I'd really like to get into, but it's become an issue to where my officers are being called out, which now it's really gained my attention. And I would like to see either, if Nora or Doug or Councilman McKinley want to join me on that call with Marcelo. But it has been documented both by, I think, the tennis pros and the residents that this is the issue that's been going on. And I do believe that Doug and Nora did have a conversation with Marcelo about this as well.
I know Doug has spoken to him, but I know Doug has had a lot of conversations with Brandon too. He's the TFA coach because he's.
No, you're breaking out.
Sorry. I know Doug has had a lot of conversations with, I think it's Brandon, right, Doug? Who is the TFA?
One of them.
Yeah, he's the TFA coach because he's using the courts for like 4 hours a day. And we're getting a lot of complaints from other residents. I know Tracy has gotten a lot of calls from people complaining about not being able to get on the courts.
Well, I'd like to say that practice, we don't usually start till 11 because and out of respect for the fact that we take up 1 or 2 courts.
Yeah.
And so we're allowing that the busiest time is in the morning. And so trying not to be a nuisance, and again, taking 1 or 2 courts. And then if there's a need, we congregate back to 1 court. So when
Tanya, real quick, just keep the thing moving and the issues moving. And this is not going to be a back and forth. It's just going to be state your issue, and then we move on. Right. So let Nora finish what she was saying, and then we'll move over to Doug. And then if there's any additional comments or questions, we'll get into it. But this is not a back and forth in between different individuals. This is a Parks and Recreation Committee meeting.
Okay, sorry.
You do have about a minute left in your time for public comment, but I want to get Nora the opportunity to respond, and then Doug the opportunity to respond as far as any conversations they've had with Brandon and or Marcelo. Doug?
Well, so what we're finding is that I think because of COVID, all the other local tennis courts have closed. So all the tennis pros are congregating on our courts, trying to use our courts to teach people because they have no other place to teach them.
Right.
And so it's just caused an awful lot of aggravation for the past several months. And since we have no enforcement capabilities, I mean, as you know, Robert, we can't be sending police over there all the time to handle disputes. We don't have anyone at the courts who can manage who's on the court, whether they're supposed to be there, do they have a residence key? So, I think I'm not a tennis player, and so Doug and Tracy speak more to the tennis people, but I sort of feel like maybe we should just not allow coaches on the tennis courts for the rest of this year until this COVID thing calms down, because it just causes we have daily aggravation with it, and we don't have the staff to manage that.
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to close the courts down for, that's even going to be harder of who's a pro, who's not a pro. You know, as long as they're being respectful, and if there's issues as far as time management, as far as if they're using 4 hours of a court and occupying a full court, while others are waiting, again, there's a time limit that you're allowed to use that court. It's 1 hour. So they need to,
Right.
they're using management. It's not going to be, again, an hour per student that's there. If you have 4 students, you use that court for 4 hours. That's really not fair for everybody else that's trying to get out there, especially with all the other courts that are closed. So I would make it clear to whoever's out there teaching classes, and I'll be meeting with Brandon again, whatever other coaches out there. If somebody shoots me a text, I'll run out there and talk to them. But we can come up with some sort of program or way to make sure that, number one, we can identify who the coaches are, and number two, identify that the fact that they are teaching Windermere residents, and then 3, come up with a schedule so we know that they are not conflicting with other residents that want to utilize the course.
Yeah. Doug says he's locked out. I just got a text from him.
Yeah, all I have is 3 people in the waiting room.
Oh.
One of them.
Hey, it's Tracy. This is my first Zoom, so bear with me here.
There she is.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I think that a lot of this is probably going to resolve itself after the courts, especially the local schools where a lot of these kids are going and going to be trained, will probably fix itself. I think like everything else, things got crazy and people were all scrambling to find courts. I don't think I don't think as a resident you could say that if you want to go be on the court, you can't have a pro. If I want to go take a private lesson, you should be able to have that. But I do think maybe a time limit makes it more fair. And maybe probably some of the confusion has been that I think there's been misinformation to the parents from some of their own coaches that has probably caused some confusion, and from some of the, so maybe we could square away the rules a little bit better. And, I totally get the parents, they want to work with their kids. They live here. I see both sides. And I just think that we could be able to make it work if maybe there was just a little bit more rules. And I really believe that once everything clears up and starts going a little bit back to normal, this will kind of resolve itself. But I think the biggest thing is you don't want somebody running a tennis academy on your courts. And we don't really, do that with Parks and Rec. We've always kind of said, you can't really run a business out of our courts.
Right.
I think that comes in with, all kinds of issues, legal, somebody gets hurt, there's lots of things that could probably happen. So, I don't know, that would be kind of, I've tried to think of different solutions. I have thought about it all day because I like to play tennis. I understand. I do know that as many people that are complaining about the coaches, I kind of feel like it's a turf war for the coaches. It has nothing to do with the residents. The residents have just kind of been caught in the crosshairs of this whole thing. Everybody just wants to play tennis. They just want their kids to play tennis. And there's just been, I don't know why it's gotten like this except for the COVID and lack of courts around town.
I mean, you're right. That's certainly the problem, is that all these coaches have no courts to teach on.
It's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
And just to say the other side, we also get tons of complaints about people that can't get courts. And I'm not blaming it on anybody, but I know I've had problems getting courts sometimes. And so as many people that are complaining about the coaches, they're also complaining about no courts being available. So it's been frustrating for everybody. All sides of the argument have something that is very legit that they have a complaint about. And we're just kind of stuck in we're Parks and Rec. We're just, volunteers here trying to make the parks nice for everybody to use them. And maybe we just need some rules a little bit stringent rules that would make it more clear what's allowed and what's not allowed, and just go from there. But like you said, we don't have any way to, patrol it. It's just,
Would anybody have an objection? This goes out to the entire board, of me drafting up rules and regulations specifically for tennis pros to operate on the courts if they are going to teach residents on the courts, meaning that we would pretty much set up a time and a date where they can utilize certain courts at certain times, so they're not monopolizing all the courts all at one time and stuff like that. And then we will have a list of those tennis pros, and we'll have a list of, the students that they're teaching during that time. We can do it on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, and then hopefully that'll resolve a lot of these issues.
How are you going to enforce that, Robert?
You come up with a calendar, and then we would post the calendar like we did in the past. And then if somebody is out there, all it needs to take is a phone call and saying, hey, court 3 is taken up by somebody. It's a tennis pro. Did they reserve it for that time frame? And if not, we would go ahead and send somebody from Public Works or myself would go out there and ask them what's going on.
Hey, Mr. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what Ms. Mitchell said. I think that if you give it a month, school starts back. I don't think there's a need for that, and it will also encourage more policing. I will tell you from just personal experience, they get on at 11, and there is not people waiting at 1 o'clock at 90-degree weather for those courts.
No.
It is literally my child. And if there are people, then they get off the court and move over. And that's the underlying issue is not when I can't get a court, it's Saturday mornings or it's Sunday mornings, because I play tennis too. And I sit and wait. It's not in the heat of the day. And that's why they go at 11 o'clock. And as far as the 4 hours goes, if someone's waiting, they combine and they get on one court, or they get off and they do yoga. They always free up the court if someone's waiting, if they have an availability to do that.
Okay,
Now,
that's Robert.
Yeah.
I think the assumption is you're assuming he has the right for a court for 4 to 6 hours a day. And I know we fielded multiple complaints that we've never had this type of abuse by a single pro in 15 years.
well,
So
there's no one out there at 1 o'clock.
I'm a tennis player, and I can tell you I've talked to people that have complained. And I know Tracy has it just spoke, and unfortunately I fell off the line. We're assuming that he can go out and conduct a commercial academy for 4 to 6 hours a day. And I think that is not what we've intended for our tennis courts. They've intended for resident use and for 1 hour time blocks. And those are the rules.
Now, if it's a 1 hour time block and there's no one waiting, they're supposed to get off?
Yes, those are the posted rules.
So no one's waiting. You only get to play for an hour. If anyone's an avid tennis player, 2 sets takes longer than an hour.
Right now, those are the posted rules, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, and again, we don't want to get into a back and forth between committee members and members of the public.
And I fell off the line.
I think the posted rules are actually that you have an hour, but if nobody is waiting for you, you have 2 hours. I
That's
believe
correct.
those are the correct rule.
That's correct.
Yeah, that is correct. Yep. And the other thing is that it's not just the kids they're coaching have to be not just Windermere residents, but they have to be Windermere residents who are tennis members, which is a much smaller group of people.
So here's my compromise, is that I will meet with the tennis pros. I'll go out there, staggering my time, and meet with them. Again, I think you guys are right. Once this is over and school's back in session, this will not be an issue. Hopefully it will not be an issue. But if it does continue to be an issue, then we'll get more stringent on the rules and regulations as it relates to tennis pros being out there. But I'm going to meet with Brandon. I'm going to meet with Marcelo. I'm going to meet with Damon. And then there's a third party too that I've had to talk to.
Yard.
Right.
Would there be any value in having the pros register and show like proof of insurance and coverage? I mean, I know there's probably always a, worry that some kid gets hurt. They're not going to probably sue the pro. They're probably going to sue the town. And I know it's far-fetched. I just don't know if that's something that, if they're a registered pro and they've been approved by the town, that could also make it kind of like easier. I don't know. Maybe that's a big deal. I'm just that's the lawyer's wife talking.
Yeah, well, Rick can tell you we're gonna get sued anyway. It's for the deeper pockets. But yeah, I mean, again, we can get really stringent as far as, the who's out there as far as teaching and stuff like that. But I'll talk to them, see if I can get some sort of agreement, gentleman's agreement. And then if I need to, I'll draft up some harsher language as it relates to the rules and take it back to Parks and Recreation at the next meeting.
That's great. As long as you can provide some enforcement, because it's very frustrating for all of the committee members. We get a lot of complaints on both sides, and unfortunately we have no enforcement capabilities. So
yeah, well, I mean, I can designate, me being the town manager, or chief, we can trespass somebody from the park.
Okay, that's great. So
Again, that's not our intent. It's just, if somebody calls us out, we do have to get out there. So, if Brandon, if he's being picked on or anything like that, I didn't have a picture of anybody out there. I didn't know who was out there. All I got was a text, and then I called Sarge up, and then Sarge doesn't know Brandon from anybody else. I don't think he's ever met Brandon. So again, I'll speak to Brandon probably tomorrow, if not next week, and we'll try to hammer something out.
sounds great.
Hey, Robert, just
Yes,
to
sir.
clear one thing up too, I know there was a lot of worry that this was caused by other tennis pros. I was the one that texted Robert day before yesterday because I saw a coach out there with about 7 boys, 6 or 7 boys. They had Windermere Rec Center. I had no idea who the coach was or anything else, but it was just the courts were tied up. There were a large group out there. Then I went back, and that's when I recognized that it was Brandon. And I stayed there for a while until the police sergeant came up, and then I left after I talked to him real quick. But the concern is that somebody might, and not just necessarily this pro, but any pro, would be abusing the system by bringing in outside non-resident students to train tennis on our courts, when the primary use of our court is for the residents of this town, for the recreational use. So, Robert, I agree that meeting with them would probably be the first step. If that doesn't solve it, then we probably need to go the route of having them certified and approved by the town to be able to teach there. And along with a set of rules, if they violate, they'll be trespassed.
Understood.
I have a question. Is there an agreement with Lake Kane to be able to use those courts and provide services to non-residents?
You want me to answer that, Robert?
Yes, sir.
Tanya, we do on a very limited basis. We have the adult the kids summer program, mostly for beginner kids that we do 3 weeks a year. And then we have a limited basis that we do during the evenings for kids. So we've been doing that roughly 12 to 15 years with Marcelo. The strategy is to seed kids from beginners to intermediate to advanced to potentially play, but it's strictly a kids program to really get kids in town to play and to advance to a higher level.
But again, it might be non-residents. We're going back to that. That's a concern.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The reality is for that is we always have a few resident kids. If we didn't, the group would be so small, Tanya. that we wouldn't have our own program, and we structure it. It's very controlled. For instance, the camp out there, under very strict protocols. I observed them 3 weeks ago that they played under COVID. They had all specific ball hoppers. They had places to put their water. We were very careful with that. So it's very structured that we have to encourage kids to play
Hopefully
tennis.
Doug's phone died. Yeah, it's just like if we were to try to start a soccer team or a softball team or even a tennis team, because we're only 2.2 square miles, 3,800 residents, it's hard to fill up a class, fill up a team. So again, whenever we have these clinics, we open it up for non-residents to participate. They just pay a higher fee. And that's the deal that I am understood that is ongoing with Marcel. I don't know the name of his company, so.
Correct. MG Tennis, correct.
So if the board agrees, or the committee agrees, I'll go ahead and meet with the tennis pros and make sure that they understand the rules, the regs, and not to monopolize the courts. And if it continues past when school starts, then we'll get into more strict guidelines. Is that the consent of the committee?
Works for me.
I'll do
Tracy?
a roll call. Nora Brophy.
Yes.
Tracy Mitchell.
Yes.
Lisa Miller.
Yes.
Doug Bowman.
Yes.
Frank Krenz.
Yes. You hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sherry Cassidy.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. And that's it, correct?
That's it. I don't think Donna's here today. Yep.
Okay. So that's how we'll proceed. The next public comment I have is from Ron and Kathleen Tegler. You may
Actually,
go ahead and.
we thought we might want to wait until when you discuss the Fernwood Park issue.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Anna Mae Klontz. Anna Mae. If you hear a baby crying in the background, it's my son. It's feeding time right now. Anna Mae, going once, going twice. All right,
Okay.
we'll go ahead and close public comment, and then Nora, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and roll through the agenda.
Okay. All right, Pet Fest, we haven't really done anything with Pet Fest for right now. So we'll move on to the Run Among the Lakes. We rescheduled that for Saturday, October the 10th. All the sponsors seem to be okay with that. Right now we're at about 600 people who have signed up. Dixie Cream is still good to sponsor and supply all the runners' food. As we get a little bit closer, we'll figure out better what all we need to do with the food, how to make that work, and we'll start advertising again. But and I don't think we have anything to talk about with the Halloween costume parade right now. Doug, do you have anything for that?
I don't, only to say, Robert, I think longer term, we may want to visit or advise me. Maybe it's already clear cut. We can't have, kids, but at some point to probably visit.
Are you talking about because of COVID?
Yeah, in town hall,
Right.
What may be advisable, more of an outdoor event? I'm not sure.
Yeah, right now we have to say we cannot approve an event that's going to bring in or congregate more than 50 people.
Right.
Yeah, so that is indoors or outdoors, Robert?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, without being able to adhere to social distancing, and with the Halloween thing, it's maybe a little bit difficult, but
yeah,
we'll see as closer that we get to that point what we can do.
Okay.
Okay, so we've gone through the tennis. Doug, do you have anything else to report on tennis?
No, just the last week of the academy of with Marcelo is next week, and that will be the last week of the kids tennis camp for this.
Right.
That's it.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the parks. I don't think we have anything to discuss for Central Park, unless anybody has a comment about Central Park.
We're just in the closeout right now on the FERDAP grant. We had our projects meeting this morning. We should have the notes probably sent out tomorrow morning on Central. And then when we get to Fernwood, go ahead and just take a minute to discuss a few items.
Okay, then let's go to Fernwood. So we have public.
Oh yeah, we did have public comment, but let me just give an update, and this hopefully may direct some of their comments as well. Unbeknownst to us, if we utilize FERDAP funds for the park, specifically for Fernwood Park, and which is also the boat ramp, then we'd have to open up the boat ramp to the general public. Sorry, I was clicking on my laptop. So in an abundance of caution, and based on the fact that, we had a lot of outpouring of issues relative to the boardwalk, we went ahead and pulled the FERDAP grant because, again, the Department of Environmental Protection stated that if we did receive any monies for that park, even though those monies weren't used to enhance the boat ramp itself, then that entire park would have to be open to the public, meaning the boat ramp would have to be open. So thankfully, again, that did come up as far as a controversial issue. We researched it, and yes, that was something that we wanted to make sure that we avoided, because of course, if we opened up that to the general public, then that would just be a nightmare out there. And people came to us and said, why can't we just segregate the boat ramp versus the park itself? The problem is that if you do that, we can do a lot split, which is easy. But when you submit for a FERDAP grant or anything like that and try to get monies, you need a survey attached to that. With the amount of area that you need for the boat ramp, minus the area you need for the retention for the Butler project, you're only talking about a little bit of area that you would actually have for a park, for Fernwood Park. If you were going to go ahead and do the boardwalk. So, and I don't think that we'd be able to come up with any other amenities to make enough points to actually get the $50,000 grant. So it was determined that, we would just keep it as one park, and then we'd probably look at self-funding whatever comes to fruition relative to the park itself. Now, I've had a lot of residents contact me, a lot of council members contact me. They've had a lot of concerns about Fernwood Park, about the proposed boardwalk. And, they would like to have more discussion relative to what's going on in the park. Either they weren't on the board, they can say that they weren't notified. But this thing has been discussed over 3 years. And I think the people that, are neighboring that area have either known about it through direct contact or have heard about it. But now, since we're moving forward with the boardwalk itself and actually looking at the permitting, I think it's grabbed more attention. So my advice, and I sent an email out to everybody, was to go ahead and put the pause button on it, because we submitted for the permits, but then we received the first round of requests for additional information. And once you do that, you're looking at thousands and thousands of dollars of permitting. And with the way political winds fly or whatever it goes, if this were to be paused, if this were to be an issue, and or if we did amendments to the doc, then you're losing out on all that money. So my advice was to hold a charrette, which we would invite not only the neighbors that are within 500 feet of that park, but also the general community, so we can get their thoughts. Because again, this is for the entire community of Windermere. It's not just for the neighbors to enjoy, it's for everybody that's out there. And see if we can come up with some sort of program or some sort of compromise, again, on what that park would look like in the future, and then go from there as far as what needs to be permitted, because if it's all landward, then we can permit it through us. If it's just a little section, it all depends on how far you go out on who you're going to have to permit through. And that's where the fees and stuff go through the roof. And that's why we pulled back on those. And once we do have the permits, it's easy. You just call in for an inspection, or you do one little thing, and then the permit for the year starts all over. So there's no real rush on permitting or anything like that. It's just a matter of getting the support, not only from the community, because if you take it right now to town council, my gut feeling is that you'll have a lot of people that are not in favor of it showing up, and we all have seen how that ends. It usually gets either kicked to a workshop or a table or anything like that. So I'd rather preempt that with some sort of a charrette where everybody has an ability to voice their opinion, even though we have. I know it's frustrating. We want to get this thing constructed, but since now that we're not under the guise, of any overhead, why not just include one more meeting with the public, get their thoughts, and then proceed from there. And I think it will have a better chance of being fully approved by town council if that is done.
Well, let me just point out, this has already been approved by town council. So
the generalized master plan, but the actual design of the boardwalk was not approved by town council.
the boardwalk was in the master plan.
Yeah, it just said it had a boardwalk. The actual design of the boardwalk, it showed a volleyball court, it showed a butterfly garden, it showed a picnic table. So generalized stuff that was park itself, which you could say boardwalk, and people may think, okay, boardwalk is just a little tiny, 30-foot walkway that's landward, as opposed to the actual design. And now the design has gone through a couple of redraftings to where you had it to where it was a complete loop, and then you actually put a gazebo at the very end of it.
No, there's no gazebo on it. It's just a platform.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is there's been variations of the actual initial design or the master plan that was taken to town council, but they have not actually approved the 100% design of that boardwalk. And if I'm wrong, Councilman McKinley can correct me on that.
The town council has approved the conceptual design. However, council has not approved final design. That still has to come back, just like it did on the area there where we're going to be building the pavilion on Town Square. That came in preliminary, and then when we get the final, that will be approved. But it's the idea was approved. The actual design, final design, has not been before council as yet.
All right, well, we're fine with this charrette, but we'd like to get this moving because the committee has been working on this project for 3 years. It's gone through approval. I understand residents feel that sometimes they're not notified about things, but in fact, they're notified every month that Parks and Rec has meetings, our agenda's public, the minutes are public, the town council has meetings, that's all public. And people often don't pay attention to that until all of a sudden there's a big red sign in the middle of town and everybody gets upset about it. But
oh man,
you went there.
That's the second time today I get that dagger. Scott's on, so blame Scott.
Oh, that was cold.
But yes.
So
Nora, you're exactly right.
Robert, this is Anna Mae Klontz. Do I have an opportunity to speak now or later?
You can speak. I mean, I didn't hear you when you came up for public comment, but once we get past this little section, I'll open it up if you have any additional comments. But when it comes to the notification, when it comes to the notification process, what we'll do is we'll send a letter out to anybody within 500 feet of the park, and then we'll also advertise it through the various means that we currently have, meaning that we have the website, Facebook, NextDoor, Instagram, and now that we have the Windermere app with the push notifications, everybody enjoys that. They like that. Again, there has to be a burden on residents to try to find out what's going on with the community. Right now, with every project we do, everybody is saying the same thing. I didn't know about this. I wasn't notified about that. You know, we would have to knock on everybody's door with everything that we do in order for them to be notified. And that's just not feasible. And that's not feasible in any other location. Again,
Right.
This is for 3 years. We've advertised various meetings, various issues. But again, this charrette will hopefully alleviate some of those concerns and, you know, get their voices heard as far as what their issues are with that boardwalk and how there can possibly be some sort of compromise between the neighbors, the Parks and Recreation Committee, and the entire residents of the town of Windermere.
Okay,
So
well, let's pick a date.
Robert, this is Anna Mae Clontz. Do I have an opportunity just to make a comment in this meeting? I just want to make sure I wrote a letter that that's been heard. I've been pretty vocal. And you know what? I don't want to go back and rehash the issue of whether we were told or not. I think we've done that. I've known approximately maybe a year about this. I didn't know for 2 years. And now I do want to be involved. And I want to have a say. And I know the Parks and Recreation Committee has worked on this for 3 years. And, you know, I've lived in my home for 34 years. So I have a dog in the hunt here. And also I want to point out that the town council has approved an idea and not a design, and that's vastly different. And so, again, I want to be involved in all of that. I think the concerns that I have and my neighbors have are valid, and our neighborhood at large needs to become involved in that. I think it's not between the 3 residents adjoining the park and the Parks and Rec Committee, and it's kind of turned into that. It's about our whole town and our neighbors, and I want to make sure that everybody else, you know, is heard on this, because every neighbor I've spoken to hasn't known about it.
Yeah, the shred will take care of that, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we get a date on that meeting, get it scheduled tonight?
Not tonight. The reason why is because to have a charrette and to invite the entire town, I'm gonna have to work on how we would do that and when we'd be able to get everybody together. My guess is, you know, since there's a lot of people that are out on summer vacation, not vacation, but I mean, they're out for the summer, I would probably propose something in August or September, and then figure out what is the best avenue to do this, whether we have 2 or 3 charrettes, maybe again having, because my intent is to not only have Parks and Recreation, but the residents and the neighbors, but also to have representatives from DEP. I had a list on there that we would include as well, you know, because people had questions about the height. They had questions about, you know, Bird Island. And, you know, I just want to make sure that we have everybody in the room, all the decision makers or people that are going to have to live with the decision there to give their comments as well. So I'll be working on that. I can't give you a specific date right now.
Okay, well, we first talked about it after our last meeting, which was last month. And so we don't want to just drag our heels on this forever.
Understood.
All righty.
Is there any other comments on Fernwood, or can we move to the next agenda item?
I guess that's it. Jim Willard was going to submit a park plan, but I didn't see anything. So
He did submit one to me, but that was prior to me moving forward with the charrette.
Okay, I have a comment. I agree with the way Robert's handling this, and look forward to the opportunity to speak at the charrette. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, anything else? Park Among the Lakes. That's Main Street. Anybody have any comments on that? Okay. Lake Down, Scott, the clearance on the east side of Fifth Street's looking pretty good. So they've done a good job clearing that, all the grass out of there.
Okay, yes, they're monthly out there and it's getting a lot, so I'll pass that along to them.
If I can really quick interrupt, does anybody know a Ted Kunkel?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
On Second Avenue.
All right. I'm admitting him in. Again, sorry for the pause. We've had some issues with Zoom and Zoom bombers, and I just want to make sure we don't have to kill a meeting. But
No problem.
yeah, and then for Ted, if he's on the phone or whatever, I'll be able to brief him after the meeting. We have addressed Fernwood if that was his issue, or if the tennis was the issue, I can update him.
It was Fernwood.
Okay.
All right, so the only other thing, Scott, is that we probably want to look at moving the fence back.
Which
Where we planted those trees. We have the fence right up against the water. We probably want to move it back to the sidewalk.
We left that distance there for the landscapers.
Mm-hmm.
We can look into it, see if we can adjust it a little.
Because if we want people to be able to swim on that side, we need to give them some area to get in the water.
Yeah, we are looking at, with the foundation, Windermere Wine and Dine, the possibility of adding cameras at Fernwood and at Lake Down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's summertime, kids got to go somewhere, but they are congregating. There's sometimes where our officers go out there. We don't want to be the bad guys all the time, but so far the interaction between the juveniles, not only at Lake Down but also at Fernwood, has been mostly positive. I think we've only trespassed 4 people, and it's because they were in possession of illegal substances.
Mm-hmm.
So Nora, I do have one item on Park Among the Lakes.
Okay.
The electrical panel.
Uh-huh.
What would your thought or feelings be about if we put landscaping around it? Tall enough to cover it and far enough away to access it. Do a landscape screen with a tall hedge.
That'd be fine with me. Is there enough room to do that?
There is. I met with our landscapers and our electrician to come up with some ideas. The electrical boxes are just so expensive, and the code requires us to have 2 foot of separation, which would make them even bigger. But we measured out for landscaping, and we can put that kind of like what we put around the parking lot at 5th and 4th up against the fence, where it makes a nice tight screen, and that can grow up about 6 or 7 feet tall.
So that's you're going to put that in between the parking area and the electrical box? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am. In kind of a horseshoe, a parabolic shape.
Uh-huh.
That would shield it from the parking lot and as you entered the tennis court. So the only thing you would see is if you're on the tennis court itself, but we have those nets and screens up.
Right.
Because it's concrete there and I can't plant anything there. It's just too close. But it would cover 3 sides of it, sit back about 2.5 feet away from the box for access.
That works for me. Any other thoughts on that, committee members?
I think that sounds great, but I just didn't think there was room. I thought the new split rail railing was very close to the box, and I think it's concrete. up to it. But if you can do it, do it.
Correct. The concrete's on the back side, on the tennis court side, and the split rail's just far enough away that we can get it in there and still be 2 feet for electrical code.
Perfect.
Nora?
Hey, Scott, I think that's a good idea.
And that way it kind of, molds into our park atmosphere too.
We don't have any,
Good with that.
I'm sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
I'm good with that.
Okay. We don't have any water though there, do we?
We do. I just had to get the well replaced.
Okay.
Yeah, we have irrigation all the way around that park. So we looked at that. We did have a situation with the casing in the well that I had to get reset and replaced. We're all up and going good there. I don't have a quote with me yet because I wanted to run it by you, but would you propose that if the landscaping can be put in under $1,000, you'd want to move forward with it?
Yeah, that would work for me. Can we get a motion for that?
Nora, I'm not really even familiar where we're talking about. Can we get a quote and see and look at it on a plan and see, or can someone explain a little bit more?
It's at Main Street Tennis Courts.
Okay, the Main Street courts, okay.
Yeah, there's an electrical box there that's really ugly. I've been griping about for a year.
I know you've talked about it, yeah.
Visual
So,
from the road. You can see it as you pass. You can see it when you pull in. It's not very attractive. She's
Okay,
right.
so when you pull in, is it kind of on the left?
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, so
I haven't noticed, but I'm not a tennis player.
big open electrical box. So we had initially talked about
Painting.
putting a new cover on it.
Yeah.
But I guess that's very expensive. So Scott's idea is to put landscaping in so that you don't see it.
Okay. Okay.
Which would work for me. So do we want a motion to spend up to $1,000 on that, or do you want a motion just to have Scott submit a landscape plan to us?
I don't think this warrants going around the barn with all that. I'd like to make a motion that we proceed do the landscaping if it costs less than $1,000.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Let's start the voting with Leisha,
Aye.
Sherry,
Aye.
Frank,
Aye.
Doug,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
and I say aye. All right, so let's do that.
Nora, can we go back to Lake Down a second?
Sure.
I had a question. So the goal, I didn't realize, the goal in clearing that is to make a larger swimming area?
Yeah, because it's a very popular park, so we want to clear that side out a little bit.
I was hoping, and we could address Fernwood in Lake Down in the same manner. Those are our two parks that feel like they're used by non-residents more than residents, especially Lake Down, because I don't think the families and the kids go because it's so overrun. It makes me nervous adding that. And I know there might not be anything we can do about the non-residents. I know it's an open park. I know there's FERDAP money, but it is really, it can be a really nuisance to those that live right there. I just think it needs discussion before we take a fence down and turn it into area. I didn't know that was the plan. I feel like the residents that live there, even if there's not a lot we can do, probably need to be heard a little bit. I know they're very frustrated. It's a very hard to live across. I know we did a building project right across, so we spent a lot of time there a few years ago and was just amazed at kind of what those neighbors have to put up with right there constantly, especially in the summer. Because, kind of same with Fernwood. I'd like to get our parks at least good discussions on how to get them back for our residents. I know we can't legally make them just for our residents, but how we can maybe make steps to do that. The cameras will help, what steps we can take before we enhance them I'm sure the families in Windermere would love a bigger swimming area. I just didn't want to attract more buses coming in and kids being dropped and all the hoopla that happens there without at least letting them talk through, the neighbors that live there, as to what they think we can do, what their concerns are, what their thoughts are. Because those are two parks that really, really are tougher to live by because of the amount of people that come in that don't live here. And when they don't live here, Robert, you showed us the picture of all the trash on the dock last month. They don't live here, they don't respect the parks like the residents do as much.
Well, I'm not entirely sure how, saying the trash is left by people who don't live here.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying they're very much used, and it feels like, I certainly don't have facts, it feels like a lot of them don't live here. I see it at Fernwood. The people that are being picked up off the dock, they're using the dock, and I know it's a public park, but they're using the dock just as a launching point and leaving their trash all in the park, leaving their stuff, driving fast down our streets. So I just think, and I think these are great amenities. I think we want the parks, but if we could have some discussions over what the issues are, so we can make a good decision over adding to them. I mean, I'm all about adding to our parks and making them great. I would love a boardwalk in Fernwood if it worked and if it didn't drag in more issues. But I feel like we have to all talk about what the issues are and maybe what can be done, if anything, before we, especially those two parks. They're really hot buttons for the residents that live around them.
Well, I know I met with the chief, and I know that he would really like to have cameras.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, that's a great step.
Yeah. And so I know Robert's working on that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm not sure what the.
I don't know either. I just feel like those residents, maybe they can be invited to the charrette. Those are just our two hot button parks. And maybe they have something to say. Maybe they have a suggestion. Maybe they, I mean, I don't know, and I don't live next to that park, so it's hard for me to, I've tried to think of solutions to help them and what could be done, because I do know there's a lot, going on down there. But I think, expanding their swimming area is probably going to be an irritant to them right now with as much hoopla has gone on with the park.
Well, I agree that there's a lot of people coming, but I do know that a lot of town resident kids still use it.
Do they?
Including my own,
Okay.
and most
That's
of
great.
my neighbors and their friends. And, I give them the rules and what they're allowed to do and what they're not to do. But, it just, I don't know how it got so big. It seems like something that got publicized. And
What got big, Tracy?
The volume,
Yeah, I think they just had nothing, like, it's a COVID thing as well. They had nothing else to do.
And they
So-
can only gather outside. I think it's
Yeah.
a escalation of what we're living in. It's unprecedented time.
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely.
But I think
Right.
it's go
But
away,
it just needs to be talked through a little
Yeah.
bit, before we make some moves, and they still may be the same moves, but I think they just deserve a little discussion, a little talk through, a little thought, especially from those that live next to them, because perspective is different
I
than when you
100%
don't.
agree with that. I mean, we have to consider all our residents and come up with solutions. And, these are like crazy times right now. And I think everything has been exasperated. And Bird Island's been a problem forever. And until that gets situated, but that's not a park problem. That's a Bird Island problem.
Right.
Right. And the lake's a problem, unfortunately, we can try to solve with help with partners, but we can't solve. When we were on the lake last weekend, I saw boats starting to go by Seagull's mansion because it's a nice sandy spot too. So, we may never solve that problem. So as residents, I'm for our town and I'm for our parks. I'm not for West Orange County using them. And I know we don't always have, the law on our side with that and the rules, but the best we can to try to keep them as town parks, especially when they're coming down our residential streets with babies playing on every corner at least on my street, and pets walking and people walking their dogs. So I just think it needs some good discussion over the best foot forward you know, for all of us.
Safety is key. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that, you know, is kind of getting lost a little bit because everything's getting a little bit crazy. But you know, I just feel like we have to do what we can to make the parks as nice. But I agree with your whole decision to, you know, get everybody's opinion because it's important.
Yeah, that would be awesome. If we, I don't know if Robert, that's appropriate to, you know, invite them to the shreds, just, hey, you know, park issues. We know these 2 parks are our hot buttons. What can we, what suggestions do the neighbors have in helping with that?
I may want to just separate the two.
Okay.
Because once we talk about Fernwood, we're going to be talking about Bird Island. And, you know, I don't want to throw another one into the mix. But just to make sure the record is clear, we do not have a designated swim area in the town of Windermere.
True.
That's correct.
It was approved by committee probably about 4 or 5 months ago to expand the usable area at Lake Street Park.
Okay, I was probably out during those times with family issues, so I missed that.
It was not swimming because we don't have a swimming area.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
But yeah, we did approve it to open that area up a little bit because it is a popular park.
If I may public comment on that note, I know you guys have said over and over that it's federal grant money and therefore we can't make it private for the town only. With other federal parks or state parks, sometimes you have to pay for a pass to park or get there. Is there something like that that we could possibly implement that might be helpful?
Ooh, that's a good idea. Nobody's ever.
Yeah, I think we just have to get creative, Robert. And I know, you know, and just explore what can we do, because these are our parks for our residents. That's our goal. I don't spend my time volunteering here to make parks for West Orange County. I do it for our residents. So it needs to benefit them the very best that we can.
I think we did touch on that we put stickers in the car like you do at any beach when you go to like Rhode Island, or you have to prove.
Well, the issue is, again, it's not parking is not the issue. It's the kids going out there and congregating,
right?
You know, just to play, you know, so having a park pass in your car is not really, it is.
Right.
I was thinking more like a wristband, Disney sort of, you have to wear it to be there and you can only have maybe like 4 guests.
Yeah.
We have no way to enforce anything like that.
Yeah, that's difficult. You know, I think the thing is we just try to figure out ways where we can make sure that everybody's safe, everybody's, you know, abiding by the rules, whether it's more enforcement out there, having the cameras out there. Hopefully that'll deter some of the bad things that are going on out there. So we'll try that first before we get into, you know, anything else. I mean, that is just a really difficult thing to do. Yeah,
any deterrent, though, would be helpful. Robert, any deterrent, I know nothing's going to solve it all. Nothing's going to fix those parks fully, but any deterrent that we can put in is just going to slowly progress it backwards, hopefully, where it's just not as easy to come. I've watched having the officer down there checking, asking everybody that walks on the dock if they've got alcohol in their cooler. That's a great deterrent. I mean, it's worked really well. Changing the lock to a key release has worked really well. So each piece helps.
Yeah, right now we can only ask them, can we search your cooler? And they have every right to say no. But we have an ordinance. We have an ordinance right now that's up for consideration for first reading on Tuesday and second reading in August, that they don't have to give consent. We can go ahead and search those coolers.
How can you do that?
What?
How can you search someone's private property?
You're gaining access to our property. So they can do cooler checks just like you would at some of the other stuff. You know, Florida Fish and Wildlife, they'll check coolers for filleted fish on the, you know, that when they go on the boats and stuff like that, and they look at your catches.
Okay.
Lake down boat ramp. Orange County's off of 6th Avenue. If you go by there, they have an ordinance and a signage that states that their staff can search coolers. It's going to mirror what they have.
Robert, can I speak to this issue very briefly?
Yes, sir.
I think it's very important to have the neighbors' input, especially if you're going to be expanding the capacity for Lake Down Park, especially, or doing anything to increase the appeal of the park. I get voice messages and texts almost every day about issues at the park, and I know that our officers are there every single day. There's upwards of 200 people a day coming and going at that park. There's a lot of vandalism. There's a lot of, there's illegal drug use. There's that type of thing. And I know that a lot of the residents are becoming increasingly resentful of the fact that they can't use the park because it's completely overrun with, it's just completely overrun. I'm not sure where everyone's coming from, but it's really, there's no capacity limits there, and it's just not usable for the residents. And I'm sure it may be the same way at Fernwood Park. I've seen some instances there, but especially the one at Lake Down, it's really, it's become a hotbed, an issue. So I think it is very important to get the residents' input on that before we make any major changes. I'm all in favor of cameras too, though. Thank you.
Was there anything else, Nora, for the good of the Parks and Recreation Committee?
The only other thing we have is to go through the regulations for the boat ramp and the tennis court, the keys, which we were going to change. So if we can look at those. So the changes that were in here is to increase the tennis court fee to, I think, $35. And each key will be numbered and logged. Should someone, not the permitted resident, be in possession of the key without prior authorization of the town, the key will be confiscated, and the resident household will not be eligible for renewal 1 year from the confiscation. If someone's caught with a forged key, that resident and household shall be banned for a 2-year period. Replacement keys are available for $100 each. Only one replacement key per year will be allowed. So those are the proposed changes on the tennis court key. Well, the boat stuff is supposed to be is not attached here, but essentially the same regulations for the boat ramp.
I have a comment on the boat ramp one. We see people that use it that they probably didn't need a key, but sold it or got it for somebody who does want the key. I know somebody could actually lose their key, but somebody could also go sell it for $100 in a heartbeat and get that kind of money for it. Is there a way, and I don't want to add more rules, but is there a way for, if they have lost a key, that they actually have to petition us for a new key, or document or send it something to make it just a little bit difficult than to go buy a key for someone that lives in Keens Point for $100 so they can get their boat in easily?
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be more documentation when it comes to who gets passes. So, we'll be able to see who on a yearly basis is losing their key.
Okay, something would be great.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll know that if October 1st they buy a new key and then they lose it October 5th, and then the same thing happens the year after year, then we'll have a track record. We can say, listen, you're abusing this privilege, because it is a privilege, it's not a right. So we can say, listen, I'm sorry, but you're abusing this, and that's why we are now numbering the keys. So if they sell it to the person in Keens Point, let's say, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then if that person is found to have that key, and they're Keens Point residents, then our officer, whoever's going to be there, is going to be like, okay, where'd you get that key?
Yeah,
If
just
they
a little.
I just found it, on the ground or anything like that, whatever it is that person, the household that has that key loses it for a year.
Yeah, I mean, just if Diane, when she gives them out, could be aware of that, people will probably try to do that, to sell off their keys and come get another one. That would be just, kind of great to keep an eye.
Yeah, we're putting more teeth into it to where, we hammer down on the people that are either letting people borrow their keys or if they're selling their keys.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Yep.
No,
All right,
no.
Yep.
I had comments on the tennis, 3 specific areas that I thought needed to be tightened up. Is that okay to discuss at this point?
Of course.
Okay. So I don't want to be nitpicky, but in consideration of all the discussion. So for 4E, at the end, we have semicolon maximum 2 hours.
Uh-huh.
I thought we should say back to back, maximum 2 hours for back-to-back play. It's just not clear to me when we just have maximum 2 hours kind of sticking out there. That's just my opinion. So that's 4E. On number 5, we sort of imply that the resident member is present, but I think we should add clarity, that shall not use without the tennis member being present.
So we could, a guest must be accompanied with by a tennis.
Sure.
Okay.
Something more direct. And then in 7, I've said in prior meetings, I don't think we should ban tennis pros, but some strong statement related to what Robert said, that tennis pros are allowed, assuming they follow all the pertinent rules defined in the town regulations or something to that effect.
All right. Well, I think Robert's going to draft some regulations specific to the tennis pros that we could add, add at number 7.
Okay.
Robert, is that correct? You're going to draft that?
Yeah, I'll put in some more teeth, and then, I don't play tennis, but if your match goes over an hour, maybe it would be, 1 match or 2 hours, whatever's less, but I'll try to wordsmith it and send it back to you guys.
I like the idea of anybody can get an hour tennis lesson with a pro, but realistically, if you're going to go out there and play a match, you're going to be on the court more than an hour. It could be minimum 2 hours, especially if you go 3 sets. I think somebody else mentioned that, but so that's, I don't know how you word that.
Yeah, it's just that, Tracy, if somebody's sitting there waiting, it's the courtesy to keep it in an hour. That's just my opinion. If there's nobody waiting, then continue to play and play an hour and a half to 2 hours. Because otherwise, that probably is correct. An hour's too short. But if somebody's waiting, an hour is typically the courtesy.
I don't know.
I'll circulate some wording.
Doug, if you're out there and you're in the middle of a match, you're going to want to just quit your match at 1 hour. If you're like,
I don't like,
it's just recreational play, but I mean, I'm just speaking out loud as a tennis player.
I agree, Tracy, but if I'm out there, I respect the courtesy of somebody sitting there on a bench that, regardless of my level of play, that I keep it in an hour in respect to them. And oftentimes they don't walk up just at the hour, that maybe, 15 or 20 minutes into my first hour of play, type of deal.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys are the tennis people.
Well, I think that most people that I don't know. I mean, I get your courtesy thing. I see both sides, but most people, I don't know, Doug. I just think that most people that go out there that are going to play a match are going to, even if you're playing for fun, if I go out there with my girlfriends that live in the neighborhood, we're going to warm up, you're going to, play, and then, I think there should be flexibility on both sides, I guess is what I'm saying. If I would,
Yeah.
on my side, if I went out to a court and somebody's in the middle of a match, I wouldn't be looking to kick them off. I'd let them finish their match. And
Yeah.
then,
Right.
you know, so it kind of goes both ways, all I'm saying. I'm just thinking realistically,
Yeah.
time slot.
Yeah, I just think if we're consistent with trying to get resident players, that if people are waiting, that keep it to an hour. And if they want to hang around, finish, and wait for another court to open, to go back out and, play a little more.
Well,
So,
that's
were
what
you considering that app where you can actually sign that you're on it? That I don't think that people mind waiting, Tracy. I think the thing is then you just kind of go back and forth trying to figure out, well, is it Main Street that's open or is it Butler Bay that's open?
Right.
And how long have you been on here? Are you going to leave in 10 minutes? And is it a timing thing? It's really like a timing thing. Did you get lucky? Did you get there 5 minutes before the previous group or the other group? So if you could say, not necessarily book it, but say somewhere you could say, like, I'm here and I got here at 6, so I will be here till 7. And then the people don't show up. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, like you said, a courtesy, but I don't know if that, I know friends of mine have suggested that there's a few apps out there that will allow that situation, but I've never used one. And personally, if I had a real match, I wouldn't play at a public court because I knew I can't be under a time constriction. So.
Right.
Most of the complaints we get are just with the pros. We really don't get any complaints relative to us residents playing. I could wordsmith it to where you can't start a new match after that initial hour.
Right.
Something like that. And I think that would create some, respect. And, if it becomes a real issue, then we can address it at that time. But right now we haven't gotten those complaints for people abusing that.
Those people are very friendly. They're more like, do you want to rotate in?
Right.
It's more just fun, friendly match play. I'm not talking like, cutthroat or anything. But I just wasn't sure if an hour was, too short.
But I've seen people come, like, show up on their bikes and then they sit on the hill and they wait and there's like no communication as to, and you do feel bad because you're kind of like, well, are you trying to get on here? Are you trying, you know what I mean? So if there were some way to know who's on what for how long, you might avoid somebody's wasted time.
Yeah, we should probably look into something like that, some kind of reservation app. I know I talked to some town residents that are really interested in it and even willing to help with it and set it up. And so that's something that we could look at.
Yeah, because I don't even know that you could reserve it, but if you got there and said, I'm on court 1, I don't know if you numbered them and then someone said, okay, well, somebody's already on 1. You know what I mean? Like, they somehow get like booked as you're on them, but not being reserved to before you get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No.
Well, Tracy, maybe you and Sherry want to look into these apps and report back to the committee next month on them and
sure.
And see if there's something
The
we can
girls,
use.
they know what. Yeah, I'll look at them. I don't have an app myself, but yeah, a few of us mentioned a couple of them. I think Doug, somebody sent you a few, right, to look at.
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, there are 3 that we had in mind. That we have. They're they cost money, but they're out there.
Okay.
All right.
But again, I think the issue with the residents will go away when the kids go back to school and the public courts have opened. Lake Cane's open, San Lando's open, so I should be better already.
I think it is. I mean, from my experience, just from playing last week, it seems like it's better.
Lightening up. Yeah.
Okay, so what did you guys decide? You want to leave this to players are limited to 1 hour if other players are waiting, maximum 2 hours back to back?
Yeah, just go with what Doug said. I'm sure
it sounds fine.
Than I have right now on the spur of the moment. So I'm fine with sticking with what Doug's talking about.
Okay, and then 4F will say a guest must be accompanied by a tennis member.
Yeah, at all times.
Guest or guests.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. I sent out what had been presented to town council for the tennis and boat ramp passes. And what's here on the agenda is not what I sent out. I sent out to you individually to look at and come up with your suggestions. The marked up copy that's here, is that yours, Nora?
Yeah, those were my suggestions that I put on it. And
Okay, did anyone else have different suggestions?
Well, we said we were going to discuss it at this meeting, I thought.
Okay.
yeah, so yeah, if anybody else has other, other stuff. So
No, I think the key guidelines are great. And like Leisha said, I didn't realize there was a market out there that people were selling keys, but if there is, that's a good point to follow up with, some kind of follow up. But I think it makes sense. I mean, again, I don't know how we're going to patrol it, but at least it's a start, and people have to sign it and realize that there are consequences if they share their keys. And, maybe that'll help. I mean, a lot of times too, there's people that just wait by the gate and get let in. So, and you don't want your residents having to patrol other people coming to the court. So it's like, I don't have a problem being like, oh, you lose your key or whatever, but some people don't feel comfortable and they just let them in. And they could be not residents, they could be pros. I've heard a couple residents tell me that they've seen that and that happens. So, this sounds like a really good first step at trying to help with the key problem and people accessing the courts that aren't residents.
Is there not a way to do the key release and and still be safe like we do at the dock? Because that's what's made it easy. They don't ask you to leave it open because that's your key in there and you're getting ready to pull out in your car or your boat. So it's made it really easy. Before we used to always get hit up to feel like somebody would ask you to leave it open. Now it's just easy to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to take my key out. So it stopped that. Is there a way to do that at the tennis courts and still have an exit that's safe?
I don't think it's a one-way lock, right? Isn't it? I think it's a one-way lock.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a push bar release, like school doors. You can key in, but you can always exit.
No, I think that was really expensive, right, Doug? Wasn't it like $1,000 lock or something?
It was pretty expensive. Scott, I think, quoted it for us.
Yeah.
It was quite a bit because the entire frame had to be rewelded and secured and beefed. It was several $1,000s per gate.
Well,
and we would have to do all the gates, right?
Correct. If you didn't, it wouldn't work out.
How many gates are there? One at each or several at each?
1, 2, I think 3 at Butler Bay, right? And,
Yeah.
Windermere Rec, and then there's only 1 at Town that actually works. The other ones don't even open, right?
Well, just know, there is another step, to take if it gets bad. If it's not that bad, that's fine. But if it gets really bad and it's a lot of non-resident use and it's a problem, there is one more step to take.
Mm-hmm.
Is there only 1 gate at the Main Street courts?
Well, the other ones are padlocked. So I think there's 2 in the back, right? That are not accessible.
Correct. The back ones are chained and locked.
Mm-hmm.
When they're not trying to tear them off the hinges.
So we could use one of those locks at Main Street. Right?
Maybe.
I don't know how they work, but I think that also when you're thinking about no matter who's at the course, whether you know them or not, you're not going to lock them in when you leave. You just assume they're going to lock it. So, I mean, you don't leave people in there playing tennis because once you lock it, God forbid they didn't have a key for some reason, then they're locked in there and there's an emergency. I mean,
yeah, there'd have to be a push bar release to get out, just like school doors and stuff.
Yeah. If there's somebody there, they don't lock it behind them because there's people still playing.
And you can do it like your door, your house, where you can't have it keyed from the inside. It has to have
like a deadbolt.
Turn. But with a key retaining lock, and I'm just talking out loud, you have to shut the door to pull your key out. So if you unlocked it to enter the tennis court, then you don't have access to get to your key.
True.
So, but there's a solution to everything. I'm just brainstorming.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, do we have any other comments on the tennis court rules, the keys?
When does that go to council, Bob?
I don't know if Robert, it's not scheduled on this next one, is it?
Yeah.
Weren't you gonna put it on August?
August. If it even needs a ordinance reading, I'm not sure if it does or not.
Okay,
So it'll go in effect for October for the new keys.
correct.
Oh, absolutely. I think there was consent from council, or if there was a motion to enact what we proposed, which was the numbering of the keys, and then the probationary period where if we confiscated a key, the person or the household would not be able to reapply for a key for 1 year from the date that it was confiscated.
All right.
All right.
All good?
Oh, good.
Any other comments on this? Do we need a motion, Robert, to approve these?
No.
No, okay. All right, I think that's it. Any other comments from any committee members?
Can I just say one thing that, since you brought up that thing about blocking the utility with trees, I was wondering, instead of buying windscreens for the Windermere Rec,
Windermere Rec,
what about trees, a line of trees? Would that be something that was more affordable?
Where?
On the back side of the fence, which would create a screen, which is essentially what a windscreen does. What do you think, Doug? Is that something, or?
Yeah, I think some people like to win screens through the visual to see the ball too, Sherry.
Mhm.
So it's, even their win, but
yeah, I'm not talking actually trees. I mean hedge. I mean a hedge, like not a viburnum, but the other stuff.
Yeah,
that's thin and easy to maintain and grows real fast and tall.
Yeah, for wind, I would say yes, it's very reasonable. For wind screens, I think it's also the visual part of seeing the ball as well with the background around the court. So.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. The tree would create the visual. It would be a visual blockage of seeing the car.
Yeah.
But I was just throwing that out there since we discussed the tree utility, because maybe the tree board or somebody wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I think we sort of established, I think recreational players could care less. I think when you get into more advanced players, the look of windscreens and gives you a sense of a real, more of an upscale court type of deal. So.
Well, I just know because some of the residents were kept asking about them, so that's all. I know then they talked about money for them or something, but.
Yeah, with Dina came and we chatted about the cost, which is pretty substantial.
Right.
Are we talking about Windermere Rec?
Yes.
Yes.
One other concern I would have with landscaping adding is we do not have irrigation there.
Right, there's no irrigation there.
Okay.
The problem.
Good idea, though.
It'll die. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the March meeting minutes?
Don't be shy now.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve.
All right, Tracy. A second?
I do. Second.
Okay. So let's vote. Leisha?
Aye.
Sherry?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
And I concur. All right. So Bob, do you have a report for us?
Nope.
Nope.
There's, I've sent out everything from the last council meeting. We have a council meeting coming up next Tuesday. I'll be putting out the information on that today. It's already on the town website, so for the agenda, but I'll send out my email tomorrow.
Scott, anything from you?
No, ma'am, I'm all good.
Robert?
I think I've talked too much, so I'm good.
All righty. All right, well, thanks everyone. Our next meeting is August the 13th. And Robert, we'll look forward to getting some charrette info from you.
All righty.
All right, have a good one, everybody. Good night.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.